do it. Well, what am I hitting on this side? It's not going. Sorry, one sec. Okay, so I'll talk to you a little bit about what the Mercury Protocol is and our vision behind it real quick. So the protocol is an application-agnostic, self-sustaining communication network. And the reason we're building it is because right now, I think everyone could agree that communication platforms, especially the biggest ones out there, all have these inherent problems that we all want to fix. Specifically the improper or kind of unfair monetization of user data, the harassment and trolling problem, and really the inability for other product creators to break through in the communication space. And we really think that the protocol can help other developers and the community come together and solve these problems. So I'm going to let Preethi kind of take it from here and talk about how the protocol is going to go about doing that.
All right, so the main thing I'm going to talk about is kind of the 4 core components when we think about what we're building with this protocol. So first is what I like to call ownerless user data and content. So as Ryan said, one of the biggest things that a lot of communications platforms do is they monetize user data. They take ownership of user data and monetize off it. So we want to create a platform where the data and content is completely ownerless, and it lives with the protocol, with the blockchain. And so the idea is there's a single user that's shared across the entire network of applications that are built on the protocol. And how this works is we have I'm not going to go into the deep technical details, but we're going to use a user will have a single seed wallet, a hierarchical deterministic wallet. And basically what this enables is you can have a seed and then you can derive multiple types of accounts off that single wallet. So each application will still get their own set of keys and wallets, but there's a single user on the platform. And what this enables us to do is a few things. So with these hierarchical deterministic wallets, we can have features where the wallet is split into certain receiving addresses and spending addresses, so that maybe a user says, okay, this application is allowed to receive tokens, but I'm allowed to receive tokens in this application, but I'm not going to let this application spend any tokens on my behalf. Or we can also allow a user to only allocate certain amounts of tokens per application that is on the network. So let's say you own 100 tokens. You can say this application I'll allocate 10 tokens to, and this 90 tokens to, and kind of rate limit applications that live on the protocol. So the idea is a user has a single wallet and then multiple wallets that derive off of it, and each application takes ownership of a single wallet. And the other thing is, obviously, if we're saying that this content is ownerless and lives on the blockchain, like a lot of it, we can't store all this data on the blockchain because that would just cost a lot. If you know how Ethereum works, you have to pay for storage on the blockchain. And so we are doing a lot of research into things using various decentralized storage solutions that are coming out, things like Swarm, which is actually being built by the Ethereum group itself, or IPFS, which is another file storage system. And other things we're looking into is ways that we can actually store this off blockchain, perhaps using oracles, where we can actually communicate with external data sources to store this stuff. And another concern you might have is like, well, if it's living on the blockchain, isn't it going to be public? Like, so if you're storing my account login information or any kind of private information, how do you manage that? And things we're looking into for that are, for example, like zero-knowledge proofs, which enable you to basically verify a piece of data without actually knowing that piece of data, or multi-party computational protocols. Basically, what this allows you to do is you can have users compute functions with their data, but that data is never revealed. Or we can do various types of cryptographic code obfuscation processes where you can basically obfuscate the code, and you won't be able to tell the difference between a program that has private information and the difference between a program that doesn't have private information. And this enables us to basically create contracts that are publicly running, but they have private data. So we're looking into a lot of these. We'll kind of come out with more technical documentation on exactly how we plan to architect this, but this is very much in research phase right now. But the main takeaway from this is the content is ownerless. No single application on the platform will own your data, and so the user has that guarantee that they know exactly where that data lives and who has access to it, basically. Second part is why we're doing the token sale. So the protocol will have a token integrated into it, and it's called Global Messaging Token, or short form GMT. And the idea is that with this token, we want applications to be able to reward active users on the platform. So if they're not going to be able to monetize that user's data, they still have to monetize in some way. And the way they do that is by allowing like content creators or publishers and so forth to pay money to get users' attention and time and so forth, and also reward users for their time and attention. And every application can kind of decide how they want to reward their users for various behaviors, depending on what the application actually does. And so let's say you're building like a blogging platform, you might use tokens to enable like micro-tipping features so that people can tip other bloggers for producing interesting content or helping promoting an article and so forth. The other reason we think this token is really important is to incentivize earlier adoption of applications. So as Ryan said, one of the biggest problems with communications apps is it's really hard for a new player to come in and play. Like if someone's trying to come out with a new social network and beat Facebook or Twitter, it's extremely hard because of the incumbent bias that already exists, and they have these massive moats and network effects built in. And so we think the token is a cool way to incentivize early adopters to come on the platform. So if you reward early users with this token, as more and more users come on board, the demand for that token goes up, and the demand for the services also go up. And so the cost of these services go down over time, and the user is able to get more and more services for that early tokens that they got. And so this is an innovative way to incentivize earlier adopters to a platform. The other reason is, if you see this diagram, so the idea is any application that's built on the protocol, let's say you have a content creator and they want to blast their blog to 100 users on the platform. So they would pay a certain amount of GMT to do that blast because they're paying for the user's time and attention. Some of that would go to the user for their time and attention, and a lot of it actually will go back to the application developers, so that they're incentivized to continue to build more and more services for the platform. And what they do with that pool that goes back to them is up to them. They can use it as revenue themselves, or they can put it back into something like a user growth pool where they can use it again in the future to invest it back in the platform and again reward active users on the platform. So this is kind of how the token reward model will work. And the third component we're going to have is the reputation system. Think of it as like a credit card inspired reputation system. And the idea is it serves as a metric for user participation and quality user participation. So, and this reputation will take into account this reputation will affect how much various services cost on the platform. So if you have a really bad reputation, an application can decide to make services much more expensive and so forth. And each application will have their own ability to set the parameters for how this reputation score is determined. But the idea is there will be a global score. And so the reason we want to make it a global score is because let's say you have a Twitter on here and you have a Quora on here and you have a Facebook on here. We don't want users to be really, really trolly on Facebook, but really, really nice on Quora. We want the score to be a collective metric of their quality participation across applications on the network. And the idea here is we want to create a system where people are actually accountable for negative participation, and they're then also rewarded for positive participation, because that doesn't exist today on most platforms, and that's why you see trolling and harassment. And we really think that by having these kinds of operational costs, it puts a greater emphasis on quality and also like the sustainability of an ecosystem. I am a huge Twitter user, and I've seen the quality of Twitter go down and down and down over time. But I think with this kind of reputation, it could really help fix that kind of problem. And the last component is cross-platform application agnostic communication. So any application that exists or that integrates the protocol can communicate with each other. So they're sharing content and data, and they're sharing the users, and they can communicate across different applications. And we think this is a huge way to help new applications that are up and coming tap into an existing user base that already exists and not have to build a user base from scratch. And so applications are able to pool their user bases. And it kind of eliminates that winner-takes-all dynamic that exists today in most communication platforms. And I think by joining the protocol, there's like a lot of synergies you can get by being able to pool the user bases. So, for example, let's say I'm an avid blogger, and I often have to post on Medium, WordPress, Twitter, Facebook, and so forth. And it's the same piece of content, but I'm posting across different platforms. And if we have all these types of services integrated on the protocol, you can imagine a world where I just publish and they get published on different platforms, and I can still interact with it in different ways, but they're all able to communicate with each other. So in summary, the primary goals that we're really trying to tackle here is, one, protect the user's privacy and data. So the user has complete visibility into what data every application has ownership or has access to, and no single application owns the data. And so they are assured that they're not doing something that they don't want them to do with that data. Two, we want to create a better system. Besides, the only way that most communications platforms make money today is by monetizing user data. And so with this token system, we want to enable these applications to think of more innovative ways to monetize and not just monetize off user data. Third, as I kind of been pointing out, like reducing harassment and trolling is a big objective of this. Fourth is disintermediating incumbent network effects, that's why we're enabling the pooling of user bases. Fourth, incentivize early adoption of applications and platform agnostic communication, as I just showed in the previous slide. So just to kind of give you a very, very high-level overview of how we envision this. So the protocol is built on Ethereum, and we'll have the token that we built and integrate into the protocol. And the first two applications that will actually use this protocol is Dust and Broadcast, which is built by Radical App itself. So we are actively integrating the protocol into those applications already. And then we'll be kind of dogfooding that for a while, and then we'll open source it and enable other applications to also be built on top of it. And here's another high-level kind of protocol architecture diagram of how you can think about the protocol. So there's various apps that communicate with it. The user content and data lives with the protocol. And it can be stored in Swarm nodes, IPFS, using Oracleize, whatever it is. And then we envision that as this thing scales, we'll have to implement a state channel implementation, and then it lives on the Ethereum blockchain. So with that, I'll hand it over to Ryan.
Cool. So yeah, as I mentioned earlier, at Radical App we have two main products that we've been working on and are continuing to work on. One is Dust, and it's already in the market. And you might think to yourselves, okay, you're going to implement the protocol into Dust first. It may not have the largest user base in the world. How are you going to gain enough knowledge about the protocol to really actually make it work? And the truth is that what we're doing with Dust is we're proving utility of the protocol. And the way we're going to do that is, like Preeti said, we're going to kind of dog food features in and see how they apply, how they work best. And then we're going to basically take the best features and keep them in the application and drive the protocol forward from there. So that's the goal with Dust. And then at the beginning of 2018, we're going to launch Broadcast, which we're really excited about. It's a pretty awesome platform, new communication platform, that we'll get more into during the Q&A. Let's see. As Preethi already mentioned, these are the types of applications that the protocol could possibly be integrated into. Review apps are one, messaging apps, social media apps, anything that involves communication. Let's talk a little bit about our timeline. So we're going to start by implementing the protocol into Dust by the end of September. Then we're going to implement the protocol into Broadcast, and then we're going to go ahead and go through with our token sale. So by the end of next month, we kind of should be off and running with the protocol, and then by the beginning of next year, we should be able to open it up to everybody. Cool. So now we're going to open it up for Q&A, and we're going to have some of our other teammates join us. Thank you.
If you have any questions, please use the catch boxes so we can record everything.
Can you pass that over?
Hey, nice talk. How is this similar or different to Whisper, which is like Ethereum's native messaging protocol?
Sorry, before we start, why don't you guys just go ahead and introduce yourselves, talk about what you do and how you can answer questions best.
Hey, my name's Elliot. I'm one of the blockchain devs at Radical.
Hello, everyone. My name is Ian. I do product and project management.
Hey, my name's Evan, and I'm one of the web developers at Mercury.
All right, let's start with that.
Yeah. So Whisper specifically is targeting one-to-one private communications, which we see as just one aspect of what the Mercury Protocol is. So generally, there's, say, 3 types of communications: one-to-one private conversations, one-to-many public announcements, and generalized discussions of many-to-many, like a cocktail-type discussion. And in that breakdown, Whisper just handles the one-to-one private communications. So we also want to develop technology that caters for public announcements, reviews, commentary, media, stuff like that. Does that help answer your question?
It sounds like the user data is being stored on IPFS or some other kind of permanent blockchain-y type of data storage system. How do you deal with right to be forgotten laws, and how does a user keep control of their data when once it's put on something like IPFS, it's there forever?
Yeah, so we also see part of this as you were saying, like the right to be forgotten. So part of what we plan to develop down the line is also off-blockchain services. So for example, Dust specifically is all in-memory storage. So the Dust method of security of only storing in RAM and temporary memory is sort of mutually exclusive to the blockchain technology. So we are also looking at open sourcing that as like a sister technology. So if you wanted to keep it off blockchain, you could still know it was secure and just keep any protocol service transaction on the blockchain. So if the feature was some amount of token exchange, that exchange would occur on blockchain, but the actual message could be stored off blockchain in that instance.
So I think I understood that you've got this Mercury protocol. Anybody can create an app for it, and then the GMT tokens go out to the users of those apps based on the rules that the app sets. So my question is about sort of if I wanted to create a malicious app, that the rule was give all the tokens that I get to myself, how you prevent that.
Yeah, I mean, technically, we wouldn't prevent that. We just hope that users would not adopt an app that doesn't reward participation unless they're providing some incredible service, in which case user adoption would theoretically balance out in the application market to services that either reward or do not reward participation.
Wait, so is the amount of GMT that an app gets is based on how many users are participating in it?
Based on the services users are paying GMT for. So for example, if an app only sends encrypted messages for tokens and they keep all of them, users would know they're probably not going to be getting tokens for using that platform. So if they join that platform, they would know that going in, or stop early on if they only want to use platforms that provide tokens.
And to clarify, I think a point of confusion might be that apps won't be necessarily given like a chunk of GMT when they create an app for the protocol. That'll kind of happen organically through user participation in that application.
Okay.
So I'm kind of skeptical about the global score to fight harassment, kind of, because it'll depend on how the developer wants to interpret the harassment, and it will depend on the developer if he wants to do negative scoring or positive scoring, and that's really up to the developers. And that may be ruining it for the rest of it, how for one application is harassment and for others it's not.
Of course. So as a user, if you can see that kind of behavior, like let's say you do something and you are like, it affects your score really badly, you're obviously not going to use that application again because you know the developer is somewhat malicious and trying to do something with your reputation. Think of it like a credit card score, right? Like, or a credit score. If you find a credit card that for some reason you miss one payment and it drops your credit score by like 400 points, you're not going to use that credit card because that's just not logical. So, yeah.
But what about transparency about your score?
That should, the developers should make it more transparent that what they're calculating the score on will be transparent for the user.
My concrete question is there will be enforcement about that somehow? Or maybe I can create an application that is going to be impacting negatively your score, and you may be not knowing it, for example, and that may be harming the collective scoring. I don't know.
So how we plan to address that, the scoring will be all on protocol, and it'll be based on objective measures. So we will have to have a bit of a calibration period, but it's going to be based on measures like account age, amount of GMT held, number of transactions within the platform, so we can kind of sift out kind of spammy accounts. So there will be objective measures that we use to determine that, and that'll all be open.
Thank you very much.
Yeah.
Some of the reinforcement and adoption solutions you're using to crowdsource what happens seems kind of uncontrolled. What happens when these run afoul of government legislation?
Can you elaborate on uncontrolled?
Well, suppose people are judging something, the value of something, or assigning tokens based on racial categorization.
I'm not sure I understand. Like you're saying,
that would be
if somebody
illegal
builds an application that uses GMT flow to measure public opinion on something?
Yes, something like that, perhaps. I guess I'm sort of suggesting that how do you deal with government regulations that may affect your product regionally? Perhaps not applicable? Sorry.
I'm just not sure I understand. Do you know what you're saying?
If you can provide a specific example of what you think the government would try to regulate, that would really help us answer that question, because, yeah.
Well, perhaps you have a Facebook page. You're measuring upvotes for trading, and that Facebook is for the white supremacy nationalist party. And you're facilitating their growth.
I think as I understand the question, that seems more like an application level.
Yes, it is.
Decision implementation. So the most we could do from the protocol level is advise what we recommend. But in terms of how people are implementing applications and moving tokens around, that'd be more by application case. So there's no way for us technically to limit that. And obviously, if the government has something to say about it, we'll do everything we can to comply. But
Thank you. That answers my question.
Sorry.
Hi again. Sorry for the second question. I'm curious about how mature the reputation protocol is, if it handles things like Sybil attacks, how it scales, if it's on the blockchain layer, if it's on which layer it's on, and just more questions. Specifically, I'd be interested in Sybil attacks and how you handle those.
So Sybil attacks, you mean like a user just generating 1 trillion accounts with reputations?
Yes.
Well, as we said, like a user will have one single account. So yeah, the user will have one single account, and then they're replicated across different applications. So if they,
are you stopping them? How are you like looking up their ID to do that? How are you stopping users from creating multiple accounts?
It's something yeah.
Yeah, a bit.
It's something that we're actually like actively doing a lot of thinking about. We were just discussing it this whole week, but these are kind of the more technical details that we will be producing a technical white paper on pretty soon. But right now I don't have an exact answer for that.
Okay, thank you.
Here, maybe to touch on that a little bit more. That is kind of an inherent problem in blockchain wallet technology, and we hope that through this whole reputation based on account age, all of like the activity metrics, that we will hopefully be able to balance that and reduce the amount of activity kind of spam accounts will be able to perform by charging these like premium, like increased premiums on participating in the platform, right? So we hope to at least increase the friction of creating, 1 trillion accounts and, spamming the network.
Hey, just wondering, how does this compare to Blockstack and what they were doing?
Where do they? Oh, sorry.
Yeah, no worries.
I'm not familiar with Blockstack. Can you just give a brief?
Basically, it seems very similar. They seem to have one identity for the user. All users can store their information on their own phone or it's encrypted through dump pipes, they call it, and onto AWS or whatever. And I guess maybe somebody else can explain more clearly, but it seems very similar. They have identity messaging, and they want to do payments. Maybe he knows it.
They don't have messaging.
They're building messaging right now, actually.
Yeah,
but,
that would be ridiculous.
Okay.
But
do you want this?
What's that?
Yeah, we can't really hear.
No, they basically created a service that acts as a mediary between providers and users of the data. So it's like if you want to set up a new identity, that is something somewhat unique to them, but you can plug in any other identity provider, and all they act as is as a middleman. So if you want to go create some new dApp, you can say, here's my identity provider, here's my storage provider, here's my messaging provider, here's my whatever provider, and they just handle the sort of flow of that information. They act as that nexus point. But for instance, your solution may be the one that defines that identity, defines that messaging protocol. It could sit on top of Blockstack. It could be complementary. It could be side by side. Yeah.
Thank you.
Excellent.
Oh yeah, just like a lot of similarities to a lot of projects, so it's not worth being like which is which, but kind of like a competitive matrix could just, I know you guys are still working on technical stuff, so that would make sense. Because like to your question, like Mastodon, I don't know too much about it, but I just remember reading. I know it's like messaging, and their initial communities are potentially illegal in a lot of parts of the world, and that inherently happens a lot in this space. So, maybe trying to deal with the upfront would help grow, right?
Right.
I don't know.
Yeah, so we see Mercury Protocol as a potential benefit to all of these kind of new and up-and-coming platforms. You can think of it almost as like the data transfer layer that's almost a replacement for a traditional server layer in an app, where you basically use it to just publish and fetch data from the blockchain. And now if, a dozen apps all build on top of the Mercury Protocol, they all benefit from each other's networks. So they all kind of have that pooled data set, that pooled user set, and it kind of helps up-and-coming platforms to kind of pool their resources and, grow their network larger.
And not just kind of content, but also kind of doing the work of designing the reward system and the reputation system for these applications so that they don't have to redo it across every single communication app, because every single communication app suffers from the same problems. So if we can create a layer that enables that and allows them to just kind of plug in and use it, but they are the kind of user experience designers, and we're just kind of creating a system that they can live on top of, basically.
You had a question?
Cool. I don't mean to, I guess, beat the horse with regards to like reputation and stuff, but it's just like, it's so fascinating, you know? You see all the stuff with Reddit and 4chan and all that. But anyways, so like with regards to the scoring, like would that be open? So like if I was like, pardon my French, but if I was like a shit poster on like all of these platforms, but then on Twitter, like I had a suit and I was a thought leader for my respective space, like would I be able to see, wow, I guess like my shit posting has caught up to me? Or would it be like, kind of like I'd only see scores that are, I guess, like appealing, scores that make me feel good? Or would it be kind of like particular apps can basically like obfuscate the score just so that I'm not like, you know, trying to go on like a witch hunt or a vendetta because some score, like some app developer is like giving me a really bad score? Like would it be open from like a system level or like an application, like app by app thing? Yeah.
So the goal for the reputation layer, for the reputation score is to be on the protocol layer. So theoretically, apps can't just repeatedly ping or gamify that programmatically. And then depending on implementation, either it will be a public formula that you can always look at and see how your different accounts break down and influencing the total score, or it would be like a transaction-based, you see positive and negative effects. So you'll be able to see how different accounts across different applications affect your total score. And now it's all public info because it's on the protocol. So you can see somebody else's public score and how it's impacted by their performance on different applications.
Cool. Two-ish more questions, same topic. Would individual devs who like take into consideration like 4 different other, I guess, apps scores be able to say, okay, well, I just heard in the news that, you know, this guy's app is full of, you know, trolls, and maybe this guy's app is actually like a Sybil attack. Like, would I, as an individual dev, be able to say, okay, I'm going to weigh negative scores from this app this way, negative scores from this other guy's app this way, and so on and so forth? And like, would I be able to kind of change the weight of those other app scores, like programmatically, like every quarter or day-by-day basis?
To clarify, there's one reputation score.
Okay.
That exists on the protocol layer. And then
on the blockchain.
Yeah. And then applications can reference a user's reputation score. But there's not different scores by app, just different app activity affects the parent score. If that helps.
Okay, but like, since you said it was like open, like would I, like, I don't know, if I had a data scientist and I was able to kind of parse the different pieces, and would I be able to say, okay, like the I don't know, the JSON blob or the, you know what I mean, like the values from these individual apps, I'm going to basically take something on my apps and take that information and then kind of weigh the scores accordingly? Or is it like, would that stuff be like
Yeah, I don't think we want applications to base the score on other applications necessarily. Applications should just kind of base it on the activity within their own platform.
Yeah. Okay.
I have a question. So my question, so a lot of people heard about Mercury originally because it was backed and advised by Mark Cuban. So that's kind of like a celebrity endorsement. And all the way back up until March, he called Bitcoin a bubble along with the rest of blockchain. So what is it about Mercury that made him change his firm stance on that and think you're a great project? And why would you have an advisor that spoke so harshly against blockchain?
Well, you know, Mark wrote a pretty bold post on Reddit about this. But basically, the Mercury Protocol has always aligned with what we've felt deeply about, which is privacy and security. So that really aligned with his initial intentions. And, you know, the token sale happened to be a vehicle that will help us build out the, you know, those intentions with the protocol. So that's where, the difference came in from specifically, knocking Bitcoin and actually getting involved with this.
I think additionally, he said that Bitcoin, he might have said that it was a bubble, and I think that's exactly what he said. But I think that had more to do with the value rather than the technology. And I think that he's always kind of been and seen the value in blockchain as a technology, and that's why, we're pursuing this going forward.
Yeah, in the Reddit post Ryan mentioned, he explicitly said that he was referring to the market value of the token and not the underlying ability of the technology, as Evan was saying. So just trying to draw a differentiation between an investment decision and a technological development goal.
What attracted Mark to your project specifically?
The other thing to note is there's a lot of people in the space who were early, they just didn't believe in it. And I think it's okay for people to change their minds as they see the potential of a technology, particularly with something that very well aligns with the original intentions of Dust and so forth. So, yeah, I think people are very much latching on to what he said in the past, but I think it's totally fine to change your mind on how things are working based on once you get more knowledgeable about something, right?
I think you said another question.
Oh.
He just said what attracted him.
So what specifically did Mark Cuban, see in?
Kind of same thing I said earlier, aligns with the, foundations we had for Dust and which will be implemented in broadcast as well. So, specifically privacy, security, banding together as a community to help end, harassment and the monetization of user data, et cetera. So that's just...
Hi, quick question here. This is less technical, but you had mentioned that you guys are dog fooding on Dust, and you had mentioned there are a lot of apps in various spaces that can potentially use the Mercury protocol. I'm wondering which of these spaces, types of apps do you want to attract first to your platform and why?
Yeah, I think we're not trying to target it to just messaging apps first or just review apps first. I think part of the goal is to field out different types of use cases and see how adoption picks up in those. So if we start seeing a significant adoption rate in specifically review apps, then we'll start looking at different features to develop technology there. But primarily in the beginning of 2018, we're going to be looking for different types of applications to experiment with different use cases of the protocol within those communities.
We've seen various applications come to us that we're already working with.
Yeah, we've already had a half dozen and incoming communications with developers that we're working with, but can't really disclose who yet. But to answer how we're targeting, we're going to try and feel out the different types first and then see how the community responds.
My question is kind of related to that one. I'm curious about the incentives for an application developer to build on top of this as opposed to building just on top of Ethereum with their own token. You touched on it a little bit that eventually you'll have this existing user base and existing reputation system to offer that incentive, but how do you incentivize early app developer adopters to build on this?
Yeah, so of the gross tokens, 10% will be allocated for development. So of the people that we're communicating with now and potentially others down the line, we'll give them some chunk of tokens for development, and they'll be able to, and specifically for applications that we feel align with the goals of the protocol and seem like they have their team put together and aren't just a random one-off pitch, then we'll work with those teams to develop the applications that we think there is a need for and a market desire for. And in terms of actually incentivizing those platforms, that's where the token incentivization scheme can come in and actually be used to award to active early adopters that will theoretically gain access to more protocol services down the line. But
Hi, Dave Burley, industry founder. I'm particularly interested in ICOs. I just read this Fortune article that says there's something like $20 billion being invested in ICOs for, I guess, funding, and I'm particularly interested in startups and whether there are any agencies that are out there now that I can go to for a campaign of say 20 to 50,000 for some of my portfolio clients who just need to get off the ground to prove that they're really a business?
I think that's probably a question that we are not experts in. First of all, it's like less of an ICO for us because we're not structuring this as a security. It's more of a crowd sale, token sale type of thing that's purely for utility. And in terms of that kind of application, it seems much more like a security use case. So I think there's a lot of ICO experts out there that you should probably contact, like lawyers and stuff.
Where?
So someone asked for the ICO. So my next question is, when is the pre-sale sign up?
Sorry, we get this question like 7 times a day in our Slack channel. So we haven't announced that yet. We will be announcing as soon as it's confirmed. All the token sale details will be announced as soon as we confirm it.
I have a question. So you mentioned a little bit about the network effects of some of the incumbents. How do you incentivize users, I guess, to leave? I mean, these companies have massive moats. They've got all the users. You mentioned, you touched on that a little bit, but can you just expand on how do you bring over, these massive sort of users that you'll need to incentivize the system? Thanks.
Are you asking how are we going to gain that initial growth, or how do we plan to grow long term?
Yeah, I mean, if you look at Facebook, Twitter, these companies, the moat is the user, the network effect that they have. How do you destroy that moat?
I don't necessarily think that the goal is to remove users from participating in those ecosystems, because that's habitually entrenched now, and that's less of a goal as much as trying to raise user expectations of platforms. So if we start off and we get the early adopters and we have a small but consistent user base, work to grow that organically as new applications and users come on board. And as we gain more traction, theoretically, the protocol network can begin to take on a similar size down the line long term. But the goal isn't necessarily to replace those platforms as much as set precedent for new platforms moving forward.
And the goal is also to give users the choice, right? So if the protocol is like, essentially the server layer, app developers can create any app they want. So it gives users the choice to kind of, I want an app that's specifically structured this way or that way, So they kind of have the choice, and then they also benefit from those network effects of the pooled resources. So we hope that that'll kind of build the traction later on and help grow the network.
So this is another question about the technology, and it's more about clearly you've been pretty successful so far, so congratulations. So I would like if you have any advice for anyone who would like to go through token sale, but not an ICO, just a utility token, and how would you clearly differentiate from any scam or whatever? Like everybody knows what I'm talking about. So how do you build this successfully? What's your advice for this?
Like you're saying, how do you build a successful token sale, or how do you build a successful...
No. So your advice, for the point you've reached so far, which is basically getting Mark Cuban on board and getting this community here.
Yeah, that's a good question. I mean, it was quite a long half a year of work for us to kind of put everything together. Obviously, I think the core thing is like if you're doing something good for the community, people will naturally see that. And we have no malicious intentions here. We're genuinely trying to fix how communications is done because we've spent years building DOS, and the only way we've seen people monetize is by user data. And so we've kind of run into these problems firsthand ourselves. And now we want to fix that with the protocol. And I think people see that genuine intention in that. And that's why Mark Cuban is kind of helping us, and Nick Tomeno is also helping us. And so I think it's very easy to start to see, like if you just look around, you can start spotting out the scams pretty quickly.
But not the media. So we can see the scams, but we cannot differentiate us from the scams, and that is the difficult part.
Yeah, I get that. Do you have any advice?
Saying how do you set yourself apart from this scam?
Go ahead. Sorry, so to clarify, are you asking from a business perspective, how do you differentiate yourself from illegitimate token launches, or are you asking from
that.
From the business perspective, or from the marketing perspective, more than anything.
Yeah, I mean, we'll be publishing some posts soon about the technical implementation details, and that architecture and some of what you've seen here already, and we can even show like smart contract code if there's still concern. But I think what Preeti was saying is the biggest part is that it's consistent, it's product thoughtful. Like the questions that we're getting now and what we've presented took months of articulation in order how to solve some of these complex issues, and it's very easy to get cornered from a product perspective. So I think,
and a lot of the right people involved.
Yeah, so I think from
a team.
Yeah, so from an enterprise perspective of trying to achieve any complex campaign over time, people will only stay involved if the work is genuine. So as you move forward and organically grow the work and the product and the goals, bigger names will attach themselves and fall into line, and people will be excited by the idea and join you. And it sort of picks up momentum, but it's not like a 1 week work your ass off and you suddenly are in a great position.
I mean, I think, and also,
thank you.
Also, it's I think it's important to be very transparent and open and involved in the community. And the more you are, like, eventually the illegitimates will get kind of sifted out, right? Like, the more, if you're transparent and open and active and actively moving towards a goal, that'll be recognized and that'll be picked up by the community.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, thanks.
How do you prevent like popular opinion from affecting the reputation system? Like, for example, if I post something like, oh, Edward Snowden is not a hero, and most of the people in the app think that he is, and my score gets affected by it, and then that prevents, anyone from expressing, their true thoughts. How would you prevent the score from popular opinions?
Right, so like we were saying, the score is going to be based on objective measurements, so it won't be based on popular opinion. So it's less to filter out, people like this person's content. It's more to filter out this is like a scam account or a spam account even. Like this is, this person's just posting a ton of just, garbage. So it's going to be based on objective measurements with the goal of sifting out kind of the real people versus the scammers and the spammers and trolls and all that.
Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Two questions. One, what's required of Ethereum for Mercury Protocol to scale? Is proof of stake, sharding, RAID-in, those sorts of things needed to be implemented first? And the second question is, how are you securing your smart contracts, and what programming language are you using? Solidity, or how are you implementing that? Thank you.
Yeah, so for the scaling solution, for more immediate, we see state channels as the most tangible solution for right now. And I've been pretty involved in the Ethereum community and with the developers, and I know that they're very much actively implementing sharding and things like Plasma.io and Rated Network. You probably heard of these. I think those will take a couple years to really be implemented and working. So in that period, we see state channels as our go-to. Once this network reaches scale, we'll really need to implement state channels. Your security question, yes, we're writing everything in Solidity because it is the standard Ethereum smart contracting language today. We also have an incredibly stringent testing framework that we're setting up right now. Every contract will be audited by multiple auditors. Everything will be open and public. And even for the token sale, all our contracts are being audited and everything will be published completely open.
Another question about auditors. I mean, this industry has only been around for a year or two. How did the Big 8 or the Big 4 now become trained in doing audits on this stuff? As an accountant, this is kind of interesting.
I think it's less accountants. We're actually working with technical auditors, so auditors who can actually audit the smart contract code to make sure there's no security vulnerabilities in it. And there's actually a few out there already. So for example, BAT had various audits done. I think Golem and Gnosis had various audits done. So it's more on a technical security level audit, more so than like accounting type of audit.
You have a question? Back that way.
So, where do you guys see yourself in 5 years? The best case and worst case scenario.
Yeah, so one of the biggest challenges for any kind of network, obviously, is really seeding the network and really growing it from a very beginning. So I think the biggest challenge is how do we get applications on board as quickly as possible and users on board as quickly as possible. So the best case scenario is in 5 years we have hundreds or maybe thousands of applications that are communicating via the protocol, and the worst case scenario is we don't exist. Yeah.
I don't think there's any more to that.
Any remaining questions before we? All right, so we'll be around mingling if you have any. We got.
One question. Are you guys going to be open source or
Absolutely.
Yeah, everything that we do will be open source.
Not currently, but in the future?
Yeah, so we're going to open source everything and at the end of the year, and then everything from there on will be open source.
Okay, cool. All right.
Yeah, sorry. I do appreciate that you're on the Ethereum blockchain, and I appreciate what you're creating. My question actually specifically talking about.
Sorry, can you shout?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Hello? Oh, nice. Hey. Yeah, so my question has to be, or actually is related to a couple of things, but the first thing that I had was inquiring about was the fact that the way that Ethereum is and allowing someone asked about open source and all of that is fine. My question actually is about the scalability and building multiple platforms that are integrative of your protocol. And so being able to, I think I missed the talk, but I think one of the strengths I read about is that it can actually scale across these different platforms and still create the same value and network value as in like aggregating multiple platforms. Is that correct?
Yeah, that's correct. I think since we went over that, it would be awesome if we can chat with it one-on-one.
All right, sure. I didn't want to take up user time beyond what I didn't hear. So the other question I had is very simple, and you may have addressed this as well.
Yeah.
The ways of earning reward tokens, just as a curiosity, and the ways of being involved with these networks seem to come across in different ways, like where you get little offers. Is there anything exciting that you could share that maybe that would be related to that, like in terms of the ways that user use of platforms is rewarded in terms of tokens?
Yeah, sure. One very simple example is, for example, I blog a lot, and I do it all for free, and I get a lot of likes on my posts. It'd be awesome if I can get rewarded for that content.
Okay, thank you.
I think you had a question. Okay.
Yeah, that's why I was saying we're really trying hard to be one of the first platforms that truly thinks through the high utility use cases for a token, and I haven't seen really good examples yet because I've seen a few blogging platforms or content platforms that try to give you tokens for being rewarded for content, but I've seen that kind of behavior that you're talking about, and that's why we're trying to structure it so that it's purely utility and you're using it because you want to get utility for other services on the platform.
So now in the early days of banner ads, you can install malware software where you could just get a couple cents every VC mail, every ad you click on, and there are people that just do all day long with lots and make tons of money out of it. So kind of a similar scenario. I mean, to prevent that from happening.
Yeah, that also sort of doubles down on our importance of making sure that we limit bots and increase friction for spammers and competitive accounts. But applications will have control at the end of the day over how they're distributing token incentivization. So if apps want to give tokens out just for logging in and you log in and out for 3 hours, then great, you can game the system, but they should probably address that as a team. But that's more application specific, depending on the ecosystem.
One question here. I heard a lot of politicians in Washington, D.C. start to use Signup. It's understandable because they have a lot of secret dealings under the table and then maybe bribery or whatever, lobbyists. And I don't know why they are keeping everything so secret. But so do you imagine if I say, I think your protocol is perfect for, say, if I want to buy drug from this guy tonight, I don't care about who he is. I only care about his reputation in the drug market. So that seems to be perfect for this kind of use case. And you will end up being harassed by law enforcement and taking out prosecution, whatever.
Yeah, this is one of the biggest challenges, obviously, with building on any blockchain technology, right? It's censorship resistant. And I mean, that's why you have the possibility of a Silk Road. Like, even Ethereum hasn't figured out how to solve that. So I think this is a fundamental, I wouldn't say problem, this is almost a feature, but also leads to this kind of stuff. I think one thing that we can definitely do is monitor the network and have our own metrics or kind of do audits of the network and figure out bad behavior occurring on the network manually ourselves and kind of take down applications or try to prevent that kind of behavior. But again, it's censorship resistant. So this is something that it's really hard to kind of solve. There will be a few oddball cases like that. And
how does the Mercury Protocol plan to upgrade itself? Because once these smart contracts are deployed, it's kind of hard to go back and...
Yeah, I think this is an area of active research. There's actually a lot of people that, I've been looking into a lot of ways to create upgradable contracts. You can actually create like contract factories and have that factory function call the underlying contract and update the underlying contract and so forth. So you can pass in various contract addresses to know which updated contract to call and so forth. So I think this is a very solvable problem. I'm not that worried about that one. Yeah.
One up here.
Hey. Here's another business question, so non-technical. You mentioned that to drive adoption, you'll first look to see which space kind of has the most activity. So you attract developers to space, they build on the Mercury Protocol, and then you reward early users. I'm wondering, like, if I'm an app developer and what I want is to grow my app, let's say it's a messaging app, why would I want to build on the Mercury Protocol as opposed to just using like the existing channels, like using the Facebook sign-on so I can tap into their channel of users already? Like, why would I use the protocol?
I mean, it's kind of like a if one person wins, they all win sort of situation, right? So assuming that, Mercury Protocol integrated apps kind of are driving towards the same goal, they can kind of help each other grow their networks. And I think that's the main incentive, that if their goals are aligned, if one wins, they all win. They all benefit from each other's success.
Are these zero-sum games? In other words, is there going to be like a winner like Ethereum or Mercury? You see today when, the 80-20 rule is going to apply where one becomes a dominant factor?
You're saying one Mercury integrated app?
One protocol, one system. Like IBM versus Apple,
right.
Google versus,
yeah.
All the others.
So the protocol that we're building actually exists on Ethereum. So if Ethereum becomes big, then we benefit from that. Actually, it's to our own benefit for Ethereum to get big. And again, we're building a protocol, so applications on it can grow big. Some might be big, some might be really small. But the protocol actually benefits from having a massive application on the protocol. So, yeah.
So it's not the case that C++ has ever been out over Pascal. Sorry, was that too early?
No.
Android versus iOS. Right?
Well, yeah, so we're making a bet on Ethereum in this case. So if XYZ protocol comes up and beats Ethereum, then that is a risk, obviously. But we are currently making a bet on Ethereum.
So recently, Kik announced that they're doing an ICO. So what's your take on that, and how do you think you're going to differentiate from them? And do you see them as a competitor? Because it's almost like it's like fragmentation in the industry.
So Kik and Kin is specifically for the Kik Messenger application. So that's more of an application level implementation where they're not open sourcing or letting other applications integrate. They're specifically developing tokenized features for just their user base on their application. We're hoping more to, so for example, Kik and Kin are not mutually exclusive to the Mercury Protocol. They could actually adopt it. We don't think that's likely, but the technology isn't exclusive. We're looking more at, backing up, we're trying to solve that protocol level data transfer layer implementation, whereas they're just looking at tokenizing their existing application.
Do you think these mainstream chat applications are going to join a protocol when they could do their own ICO and raise millions of dollars themselves?
I don't think it's likely that the mainstream applications would use the protocol or hold an ICO. I think Kick is probably the upper end of what we'd see in the near future, just from the sense that public user data is sort of antithetical to the existing user data monetization model. So there's no incentive for them to sort of give out for free what they're charging for. So the really large giants like Google, Facebook, iMessage, et cetera, it's unlikely we'll get attention from them anytime soon, but if we grow to hundreds of millions of users, we might actually get their attention at some point, at least for some partial integrations. Yeah. Right, exactly.
The other thing to think about is if every app, or if you build an application, another person builds an application, you have your own token, you yourself have to build that network all on your own from the ground up. Whereas if you can think of this network as something that you can just join and benefit from, like as a network, then it's much, much easier, right, to just use a token.
How do you onboard users that are not already familiar with crypto, and what happens when they lose their wallet and all their reputation? I mean, that's a problem with even smart people in crypto, is either getting hacked or losing their keys or forgetting their keys. Wallets are real problematic. How do you take, a Facebook user or millions of them and convert them, into this system and force them to have some sort of weird wallet thingy, that they've got to store with keys?
Yeah, so we're going to make it, I totally agree with you. Actually, Matt Galligan is solving this problem himself. He really believes in the wallet problem. We want to abstract away as much of that from the user as possible so that it's secure, but the user doesn't have to worry about all these different wallets, all these different accounts, all these different keys. And we're actually actively documenting exactly what that will look like, so we'll provide more details, but the idea is like the user, all they know is they have one account of GMT, and somehow that's being managed across applications, and how we handle that will be done by the protocol.
I'll give you $50 if you solve it. I can try it for 50 years now. Only 50? I got skin in the game.
All right, I think we should shut down the questions. All right, last question.
How do you decide you profile what data is private and what data should be public? For instance, if I want to showcase I'm a philanthropist, I want to make it public, but in the afternoon I want to sell him drugs, I want to make that private. I think in the blockchain, your data is immutable. It's also in the system, and it's kind of curious because Dust is a very privacy focused. The data disappears versus the data always will be there.
Yeah, that's one of the slides I had earlier where privacy will be, because everything on the blockchain is public, that's something we're looking into. So things like zero knowledge proofs, multi-party computation protocols, this is an active area of research, and we don't have the exact solution figured out yet, but that's something that we know is going to be something we're going to have to solve for, and something that we are going to do a lot more research on. Even Ethereum hasn't come up with their own solution, so I think this is something that it's very much in a research phase. Yeah.
Yeah. And with that, I just want to say that we are going to do more of these as we go, because we want everyone to be involved with us as we continue to develop. So I'd like to say thank everyone for coming, thank you for coming, and we're going to be around, hanging out for more questions. So thanks again.